Live in 3, 2, 1.
Well, howdy, y'all. Welcome to another episode of Wild West Coding. Episode number 10, actually. Can't believe it. It's been so much fun. So I'm your host, along the trail into technology, Ken Alger. Thanks for joining today or watching the recording, however you're viewing this. It's really appreciated. Normally on Wild West Coding, I've been doing some form of coding project, be it the rodeo app we've been working on since the beginning, or if you watched a couple of episodes ago, I did an app to celebrate the end of the 2023 calendar year and did some fireworks and go and all sorts of fun things. Today, I'm going to do something completely different. No coding on my part today. Instead, I'm honored to have with me John Capobianco, who is an artificial intelligence enthusiast and advocate. Well, I don't think that's his actual title here at Cisco, but he's here to talk with us today about the AI surge in 2024 and how it will potentially reshape things for developers and DevOps professionals. So please welcome to the show, John Capobianco. Hey, John.
Hey, Ken. Thanks for having me. I got to say that's the best lead up, hold music, lobby music I've ever had. So I'm sort of like grooving along with the music in the lobby, and thanks for having me. This is really exciting. And you know what, we can still tie this in what I'm going to show everyone today, and we're going to discuss today with you. We'll still tie it into the rodeo. I've got something up my sleeve that maybe I can start, and that you could continue on and finish the project later.
Well, that sounds great. I mean, yeehaw. So let's start here. I think I kind of threw out a title of, AI enthusiast and advocate. I read your title. It's really long. Like, I don't know how you'd fit it on a business card.
Yeah.
Why don't you kind of introduce yourself a little bit and tell us what you're doing? Your role at Cisco has changed recently. I mean, within the last 6-8 weeks or so. So tell us a little bit about that and just introduce yourself.
Well, thanks, Ken. So I joined Cisco 2 years ago. I celebrated my 2-year anniversary with Cisco in Amsterdam at Cisco Live EMEA, where I presented on AI and helped proctor a CCNP lab, met with Jeff Bull, met with David Bombal, had some MTEs. But for most of that 2 years, I was an instructor for the Cisco Bootcamp training team. So in learning and certifications, they have boot camps for product and automation boot camps, 9-day engagements, both closed enrollments and open enrollments, with a heavy focus on automation. And I actually had an opportunity to follow my passion, let's say, and do AI full time as a technical leader in artificial intelligence in the Cisco security group on the AI assistant team. So I just started 3 weeks ago, and then I had Cisco Live. So I'm getting integrated with my team. I'm getting the PowerPoints. I'm getting the messaging. I'm learning about our offerings. It was really interesting, though, at Cisco Live, the AI assistant was actually on display at Cisco Live EMEA. So our customers and our partners and us as Cisco staff got to play with the artificial intelligence for our security products, which was really exciting to see that actually live and on display. As you can imagine, every third word was AI at Cisco Live EMEA, right? It was a heavy focus of Cisco's message, of keynote speakers, of vendors and their booths. AI was absolutely everywhere in the learning and certifications, Cisco U Theater, in DevNet. I saw a wonderful demonstration in DevNet using a similar approach that I use. It's just amazing. It's so amazing in 16 months since it became available to us. The amazing innovations that are coming out of Cisco.
Yeah. So that I think. So let's kind of do a little bit of level setting here. I mean, when I talk with my non-technology friends about AI, they think that I'm just referring to the Terminator, and Skynet, and well, I'm sure there's some of that out there in the world. Like when you're talking about AI, just in the industry in general, not necessarily specific to Cisco, but you can throw that in there as well. But what are you talking about when you mean AI?
Well, so I think there's a big difference here. There's sort of classical artificial intelligence, which has been around for some years and been in products at Cisco for some time. Predictive AI is a form of AI. What the big breakthrough was generative AI, and that is the ability for artificial intelligence to generate novel content or concepts or ideas in human language. So you may have heard of a language model, large language model, LLM, and there's different forms of models now, Ken. There's small language models, visual language models, audio language models, etc. But the large language model takes a huge billions into the tens or hundreds of billions of parameters, a corpus of knowledge. And we can ask it questions and get a novel generated response. Some of this work comes out of Toronto, the University of Toronto, with transformers being invented, where the machine learning can feed back on itself to help train a model. And you may have heard that the graphics cards, the capability of GPUs today play an important part with machine learning to take in all this data and train a model.
Right.
So you may have also heard along the way GPT, as in Chat GPT.
Right.
The GPT is important here in that it's generative from the generative AI, pre-trained. So as developers like yourself and like myself, I don't have access to GPUs. I don't have access to tens of billions of parameters to create my own model. So I can go off the shelf and take a pre-trained model like ChatGPT 3.5 or 4.0 or 4.0 Turbo. There's Llama, there's Bard, there's Gemini, there's open source models. Phi 2 is a small language model that's open source. So anyway, we can point to the APIs, just like all these other APIs that systems have, RESTconf APIs, NetConf APIs, Postman.
The radio API that we built.
The radio API that you built. So this is just another API. And that's the dramatic leap, and why it is so popular and taking the world by storm is because developers like me and yourself and others listening now have access to a simple API system, a token system, where we can ask it questions. So you may see the visual ChatGPT window where people just chat with it, and we'll look at that in a minute or two. But under the hood, in a Python script, in a JavaScript, you can start to integrate artificial intelligence into your solutions just as easily as you could make an API call to, the NASA API to find out about asteroids. It's been democratized, Ken. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is groundbreaking in a lot of ways. I mean, I think there's still, at this point in its current state, I think there's still a need for, a set of human eyes on it to make sure the code is accurate and actually is working and everything. But I know several IDEs, the integrated development environments that I use and millions of other people use out there, have started integrating that as well. And you can just start typing. And I was like, oh, you want to do a function that does this? Here's all the code for it that we think.
Isn't it remarkable?
And you're like, whoa, wait a minute. That's a little spooky. But it's also very helpful. But again, having, a human look over it and just kind of double check and everything, I think is great. Now, one thing, you've been watching you on social, and you've been doing a lot of chatbots. Talk with me a little bit about how those work.
Sure. So I actually had early API access, as we talked about, to OpenAI. And then I applied for a program called Plugins. And this would be the summer of 2023, last summer. or springish summer, sometime around April, I got access through an application program to get access to plugins. Now, plugins allow ChatGPT to make external API calls on its own. So the artificial intelligence, as amazing as it is, imagine if we could augment it further. Because to your point, yes, right now in the Atari phase of AI, right, the 4-bit era of AI, which we're kind of in, as remarkable as it is, it's kind of still like the Atari. It's the first generation of this remarkable technology. And we have to keep that in mind. And we do have to keep the human in the loop. I have no disagreement here. Now, we may have heard of hallucinations, or it gets things wrong, or it's confidently incorrect at times. Here's your function call to add 2 numbers. And you look at it closer and maybe it's adding 2 numbers. One, as a human, give the feedback, make the model better. Actually, my human brain tells me that you've made the mistake, AI. Could you please retry your generation with my human input? Right? Now, take that a step further. What if we could make an API call to the Rodeo Association API with their statistics? And when I ask who's the best cowboy, it makes the API call and analyzes the source of truth, the API JSON data, to augment our prompt. Now, this is known as RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation. Now, this could come from the human. The retrieval is my feedback. Listen, right? You made a mistake. Here's my human feedback. Regenerate. Or we could point to a PDF or an API full of JSON. SQL database. An SQL database. We could make a SQL call to get data and augment the prompt, right? So then we really minimize, and I'm not going to say eliminate. It's still early in human technology, right? We can drastically reduce the chance of an incorrect answer. Again, I'm not saying it's perfect or that we've overcome this in any way, but we augment it, right?
Well, yeah, and I think that that human interaction to help minimize things, errors. I mean, there was a story from last year of some attorneys. You talk about hallucinations. Some attorneys used, and I don't know which model, but some form of GBT sort of thing to write an entire legal defense of one of their clients, and the generative AI response picked a whole bunch of cases to and I don't know what the legal term is, but to showcase, hey, here's why this is legal, that what my clients did. Well, none of the cases actually existed in case law.
Right.
Like, they'd never gone to trial. Like, it was, Alger versus Capobianco, and that case never actually happened.
Right.
And
so
they submitted all their briefs to the judge, and the judge started looking things up, and they're like, Alger versus what? And they got in a little bit of trouble for that, I think. Some fines were involved and whatnot. So somebody along the way, they're going to drop the ball of, hey, we should probably have some human review of this before we just start doing this.
Sure. I'd also like to see how they built that bot. If I were building that bot, I would retrieval augmented generate or augment the prompt with pointing at real legal documents. Right, I wouldn't just have the AI generate that stuff on its own. I would say, "Hey AI." So anyway, plugins led to GPTs, and I'm going to show you how these are built and how I use them. And it's very relevant to what we're discussing: retrieval augmented generation and API integration. And I've built these to help the networking community, and also to maybe inspire people to build their own. Now, before we get started, I was having a chat here about the technology adoption curve, right? And we have the innovators, the early adopters, the early majority, the late majority, and the laggards. And sort of what goes into all of this. I believe we're somewhere between innovators and early adopters with AI. As many people have early adopted it, we're probably sort of in this sort of phase here. We have not really established an early majority yet. So in terms of GPTs, if you pay for ChatGPT Plus, you can have access to the GPT store. And if you want to look up Network Buddy, I've built all of these network buddies for Cisco technologies, let's call them. And we're going to peel back the onion here and look at how one is built.
That's great.
And then we're going to, yeah. So if we go to my GPTs and let's take a look at the XE Buddy, which is doing very well, over 300 chats. The store's only been available for a few weeks. And ICE is doing well, 70 chats, ACI over 100 chats. It's doing really well. So if we edit this, we talk about code and like writing code, and then there's kind of no code and low code. This is conversational code, Ken. So I know it's hard. Yeah, what's kind of neat is that you actually, what could I be doing better? Anything you'd like to change. I don't have to write a for loop or an if statement or any actual Python or C++, or I literally just say to this thing, right? Your answers for OSPF are sometimes incorrect. Please make sure you're referencing the appropriate guide I've uploaded. So under configure, this awesome image is actually AI generated. I had nothing to do with the image other than describing what I wanted this chatbot to do or this assistant to do. All of the instructions here are AI generated. So it actually builds itself through the conversation I had with it. It has conversation starters and a test window. So I can say something like, what are the common OSPF troubleshooting commands? And it's going to give me a little bit of explanation about OSPF and then break down all of the commands. Well, that actually comes from the command reference guide for OSPF that I've uploaded to the knowledge base. So it's performing retrieval augmented generation here to retrieve the data from the PDF to best answer the question. And if you look at these are all real commands, and it sort of tells you why you might use each command or the situation that the command would be useful in. The other thing is we can add web browsing to this. So if I ask something like, what is the latest version of iOS XE? My PDF may or may not be totally current. So it can actually search the web using Bing to get that answer, to augment the prompt, but with HTML pages from the web.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So then if we go a step further,
as your source of truth or source of information, it's the internet is your SQL data store, your MongoDB database, right? Like you can say, hey, go out to Wikipedia and pull in information about whatever. But the network configurations, whatever. I could see building something like this around, like you were saying, around a rodeo. To keep in kind of context of the Wild West coding world here of going up and pulling in the information about the current leaders in the rodeo world.
Right. So that is totally possible. And we can actually maybe start one. I'll show you from scratch how this is done. The last thing is the actions. So I'm not sure if you know of any rodeo APIs. We can, if you have one, we could add it to the GPT. But how these actions work are, I've made a URL here, an HTTPS page. So one, it has to be certified. It has to be HTTPS. Two, it has to be resolvable with DNS on the public internet. Those are sort of two limitations for these open API schemas that you can build. But as you can see, I agree. It adds a level of security and it encrypts the traffic. And then we add our CRUD activities, Ken. So our get, show, post, put, delete, etc. It actually maps these into little, like an actual available actions. So these are the actions that I've made available to this GPT. So I can actually test the show IP interface brief action to show you this. And it should ask me to allow or always allow interactions with that endpoint. Now what's happening is this API call is triggering a PyTS job on a little Django server I have running. That Django server is getting the IP interface brief command from the always on DevNet sandbox and then returning it as JSON. So this really, Ken, is retrieval augmented generation from the network. Now, if you'll humor me here, and this is really a cowboy term, I'm going to try to maybe write a white paper or something to lock this in as simple network object transformer using RAG or snot RAG.
I mean,
what do you think? What do you think?
No.
Do you think that would catch on in the industry? No, right? We're going to take
I think
John's
so.
approach.
I mean, especially, around these parts where I live, where there's a lot of animals that have a lot of snot.
So Ken, if we wanted to build one, let's just go through this, because it's really quite amazing. So we're going to go back to create, and it's going to say, hi, I'll help you build a new GPT. You can say something like, make a creative who helps generate visuals for new products, or make a software engineer who helps me format my code. What would you like to make? And we can say something like, I would like to make a digital cowboy who is knowledgeable about rodeo, something like this. And even though I spelled it wrong, it'll figure it out. And it's going to crank a little wrench here for a few seconds as the GPT builder takes hold. No code, no clicking, no menus, no code or low code, conversational code. And this is why I think it's important. I don't think this is going away. I think that there's going to be a race for other technologies, other systems, maybe your refrigerator, maybe your laundry, maybe your car, maybe your firewall, maybe your router, where you actually just talk to these things, right? So look at right away, tell me about bull riding techniques as a conversation starter. And now it's going to break down, bull riding techniques.
That's amazing.
And it says, how about we call it digital cowboy?
If anybody's ever actually been to a rodeo and seen bull riders, that's an art form. Like, I think they're really amazing that they're willing to get on a big, huge bull and try and ride for 8 seconds. That's not something that that I would want to do.
Right. So we could actually accept the name. I like the name Digital Cowboy. Please proceed. And I spelled it wrong here, cowboy. But now it should ask us, now it's going to generate the profile picture. And I'm interested in what this is going to look like. A cowboy and a bull, or a cowboy, I don't know. We'll see what DALL-E 3. Now that is a visual language model generating the image from our prompt. So check this out. Do you see this? The hat with the cowboy boots and the sunset. That's wonderful, right?
That's awesome.
I love it. So then we're just going to, and it's just sort of, let's refine its behavior now and its abilities. What topics related to rodeo would you like it be especially knowledgeable about? So Ken, what do you think this should be especially knowledgeable about?
I mean, for us, I'm
Rodeo?
really kind of interested in how technology plays a part in the whole rodeo world. Like, if maybe there's, and I don't even know, but maybe there's, little GPS trackers or something that they put on the bulls and the bucking broncos to determine speed and angle of attack and all that sort of thing.
Right. Well, I just said rodeo and how technology plays a part in the rodeo world. The little wrench is cranking here, and it's going to update the GPT. Now we're doing this to inspire people. Ken is into rodeo and cowboy. He obviously Wild West coding. I've built, network buddies for the network. You can, this technology is available for us. So now it's sort of, now our preview has the logo, a digital cowboy with rodeo wisdom is what it's decided to add for the tagline. Now, would you like to make any particular way of speaking or phrases the digital cowboy should use to make it more authentic, right? And I think it should talk like a cowboy, right?
A lot of yeehaws and y'alls is what they need.
Exactly. I think that's so now we're going to give it more of its personality. You can tell it what things to avoid and add some guardrails if you want. You can, once we're done, we can actually click on configure and look at what it's come up with, right? We can even say, what's the history of rodeo? How do I get started in rodeo? Share some cowboy wisdom. So now,
well, and I mean, all this is pretty amazing, right? Like, we've been at this for 5 minutes, maybe the most.
right,
You know,
right,
and
totally
here,
unplanned, and we didn't discuss this in advance, did we?
nope, not a bit.
So it says, right, now it will talk like a true cowboy using authentic lingo and phrases to enhance the experience. Is there anything else you'd like to adjust or make the digital cowboy fit your vision perfectly? And we can basically save it now. Now, if I click on configure, here's all of the instructions it came up with from our conversation. And this is all it needs to right? And we can have web browsing and DALL-E image to do images. If there was a cowboy API, we could add the API to this GPT, right? And if I just hit save with everyone, and we'll save it under, sure, lifestyle, why not? And why won't it let me save it? Oh, name the GPT. I thought we called it Digital Cowboy. I don't know what happened there. Anyway. So anyway, we're going to actually save that and just push it out as a GPT. There we go. Now it's here and it's live. I can send the link to Ken. We can share it with everyone in the chat or whatever. And there we go. Or if you're at home and you start searching for Digital Cowboy, it's already live. Right? I think so. If we
That's
look
amazing.
for Cowboy.
And like I said, I mean, this took like 5, 6, 7 minutes.
Yep. So now I just want to show something else on the 5, 6, 7 minutes. How can we do some of this AI on our own and retrieval augmented generation on our own? So there's a tool called LangChain. I'm really going to shift gears here. We've seen the world of OpenAI and what we can do with ChatGPT and that public ecosystem. Well, what about people that want to maybe do it at the enterprise level, privately at home, with maybe documents that aren't public documents, things of that nature? Or if you just want to actually start building Python or JavaScript solutions with artificial intelligence. Have you heard of Django, Ken?
Django?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I used to be on the Django board of directors, actually.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you would maybe describe Django as a web framework for Python, right?
Correct. In a nutshell.
So in a nutshell, a very simplified explanation, in a few words. So LangChain is to artificial intelligence what Django is to web development. It's a highly abstracted, easily approachable framework in Python or JavaScript. I use the Python framework that lets us start to do AI development, much like you would do web development with Django. So how they handle it's. I love this. Think of links in a chain. Now, each one of these images on the screen I have shared, the source. So the source could be a PDF file. Let's do that as a basic example. And I like to chat with, say, the Cisco annual report as a demo. Now, that's an almost 200-page PDF chock full of text and images. We load it. We find a PDF loader in the LangChain framework. We pick the PDF loader. We transform it from, say, 200 pages into 200 individual pages, and then small chunks of text or images from within each page. And then we do what's known as embeddings. And the embeddings is taking that text and anchoring it to a list of floating point numbers known as vectors.
Okay. Now,
in terms of where we store this data, we need a store. So in Django, it's Postgres or some SQL store locally or Elastic or whatever. Well, in LangChain, it's the same thing. You can use MongoDB, Mongo Atlas, Elastic, Chroma, Weaviate, Pinecone, right? You have a choice of vector stores. And then at the retrieval, that's where the LLM gets involved or the AI gets involved. So we can do that retrieval augmented generation where I ask the question, what's my default route? It's going to look into the data store and look at the JSON that I've stored from the network. Or for the PDF example, who's the CEO of Cisco? Well, it's going to look in the vectorized version of the PDF, augment the prompt, and give me a very high fidelity answer.
That's really cool.
Yeah, so I just want to let developers know, or to inspire people if they want to get started. I'm a network engineer by Ken. I did network engineering for 15 years. I did go to school for programming, but that was 20 years ago. I want to encourage everyone, every developer out there, to start your journey with AI, to take those first steps, be it with a public GPT like I showed you, or a LangChain. I'll just show you very quickly. My server's up. So I'm going to open up a Streamlit server. And what you're going to see happen here is it's going to say running a PyETS job. Now, Cisco PyETS is a network automation framework. I would equate it to LangChain or Django, but PyETS is a network automation framework. Okay. So my goal here is to get the routing table as JavaScript object notation, structured text. So that way in my LangChain, I can use a JSON loader. So gotcha. Now I can ask questions of the routing table. So I can say, what is my default route? And it should give me the insight as the 000.0/0 route, which we all know is the default route, but it's going to give me the insight as what the next stop is and what the outgoing interface is. And there it is. Your default route is the zeros with the next stop IP of 10.10.20.254 via the outgoing interface gigabit 1. This route is statically configured with a metric of 0 and a route preference of 1. Source protocol code for this is S*, indicating it's a static route. Okay, now can we just maybe appreciate what's happened here, right? I haven't had to look up the device in some system, log into it, authenticate, start the logging session, run the show IP route command, find the default route, analyze the default route, maybe copy that out to an email or something. I simply ask the question in human language, right?
That's amazing. I mean, back when I was doing networks more years ago than I want to admit, that would have been amazing because you don't have to remember all the CLI stuff. I mean, back in my day, there was no WYSIWYG. It was all just, you'd sit there at the command line and try to remember everything, or you'd have your laminated cheat sheet posted next to the monitor of everything.
Right. So let me try something. I'm actually finding an actual route that I know exists, and I can say something like, if I was a packet going to, and then the IP, where would I go? Let me just try that. Now imagine the analysis this is going to cut down. Okay, and here we go. If you were a packet destined for this, you would be routed through the outgoing interface GI1 as indicated by the routing information provided. So I can actually ask it about traffic flows without having to analyze the routing table by hand or as a human. Like this to me is like having a calculator in a room full of students with pencils, right?
Or slide rules, yeah.
Or slide rules or whatever, right? Okay, so just on this point, and then I'll stop sharing my screen, and maybe we could just have a conversation for the rest of the time. If you go to Cisco U, and these are free, by the way, the things I'm going to show you. If you look for AI or ChatGPT or my name, there are a bunch of relevant courses and paths. I want to draw your attention to the videos. There are 2 videos, one half an hour and one almost an hour. There's a making a ChatGPT client with Python. And this one literally walks you step by step. What is ChatGPT? How to make a virtual environment, how to install OpenAI components, how to create and secure your API keys, how to run the Python code, and then how to adjust and fine tune and practice prompt engineering. That was my goal when I developed this one, was to show you some easy Python to get going and interacting with the API, but also so that you could practice your prompt engineering, because that's going to be a very valuable skill. Now, the next one is exactly that routing table I just showed everyone. It's the Docker components, the Streamlit components, the PyETS components. I really wanted to show people step by step exactly what I demoed here. So this little application, yeah. So I really want people to, if you want to get started, here's all the information that you need.
Well, and that's great. I mean, I think, one of the questions that a lot of people I'm sure have out there is, AI in general is a huge field. Generative AI, all these things, there's so much that you can sit down and you can read about, and kind of get lost, right? Like, as with any new technology, like, where do I start?
Where do I even
Those
start?
are like
Right.
great examples, especially if you're in DevOps, even if you're, not necessarily in the networking world, but just, hey, I want to try something that's going to give me something quick and easy that I can understand and maybe then extrapolate to my own project. That's great.
Yeah, there's some amazing things. So I didn't even know. So I would think if you were even if you were in accounting, if you're in marketing, if you're in sales, if you're a dentist, I really believe, yes, we're talking about networks and net DevOps and maybe people that code and people that run networks are the primary audience here. But this what I'm showing you, that retrieval augmented generation approach, the source is important. You just break that link in the chain and put in, say, a GitHub loader. You can chat with GitHub repositories, right? The rest of the chain, you don't change. You just change the loader and the source. Jeff and I were talking about chatting with Wireshark packet captures. So I have an image. I wish I could find it quickly. I won't be able to find it, but I could follow up with the audience if you want to see the evidence of this. I got thinking, there's a JSON loader, and there's an ability in Python to take a PCAP file and transform it into JSON. So I took one packet, changed it to JSON, put it through my LangChain and asked AI, what can you tell me about this packet? Layer 4, layer 3, layer 2, layer 1, and then a summary. Everything was right, UDP, the source, the destination, the timestamp. I was literally chatting with a packet via LangChain and AI and a retrieval augmented generation. So imagine a stream of packets. Imagine a whole flow. Imagine a whole TCP. Imagine a whole dump from Wireshark that we can just chat with the thing instead of using complex filters in the Wireshark tool. What if I could just chat with a PCAP, right?
That would be pretty amazing. So, we've talked about a lot of the upsides. We talked about, with the hallucinations, kind of one potential thing. What other sort of concerns should we be thinking about with generative AI in general out there? I mean, we've seen, some Hollywood issues with people getting generative image AIs in, non-accurate images. There was the actor Tom Hanks filed a lawsuit against, I think it was a dental agency down in Southern California that did a generative AI commercial with Tom Hanks, quote unquote, endorsing his dental practice. And so what do we need to be aware of out there from ethics or kind of the responsible AI sort of aspect of things?
I think that there's a purely utopian vision and dystopian vision, and I hope that we at least lean towards the utopian vision. So I've heard all the horror stories. I've heard all the terror. Splitting the atom could lead to bombs being dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, or it could
and back then, there was talk of, hey, if we split one atom, the entire universe is going to implode and we're all going to be done, right?
Right. But that same technology now provides heat and fuel for tens of millions of people around the world, right?
Yep.
A hammer could be used to put nails in boards to build a home or to crack someone's skull open, right? Like it's a tool like anything else. The first antibiotic, to leave you with something a little more positive on this, the first antibiotic in 60 years was developed with the help of an AI and an LLM. And that's against MRSA, the resistant staph. So I believe in the utopian vision of this. And if we boil it down to our everyday common experience, it's hard for people to think about nuclear destruction or the end of the war or an AI that takes over and kills everyone, or those are kind of sci-fi things. In our day-to-day life, I think it's going to augment our experience as humans. This could lead to less jobs in certain disciplines, but I think it's going to lead to equally more new jobs in other disciplines. I think the average human experience.
One of the things that folks are going to have to get proficient at is the prompt engineering aspect, because if you ask the wrong question, you get interesting results.
Right. The National Security Council in the United Kingdom just released their paper 2 weeks ago, their assessment of AI. It's a very good paper. You should read it. And there's one thing in there that echoes something that I'm concerned about. Two things. The adversaries can now make mutations of viruses into the millions or tens of millions of mutations using AI. So they start with a virus, a 0 day of something, and now they can have AI make an X number of millions of mutations that they just throw at the internet. The other thing is the exfiltrated data. Imagine trying to go through petabytes of data that you've stolen from an agency or from an enterprise. That in itself is hard. One thing to go in and steal the data. There's another thing to make sense of it and extract credit card numbers or passwords or whatever it is you're looking for. Now you can point that data to RAG, like I showed you today, and say, AI, go into this petabyte of data I found and help me do X, Y, or Z, right? But that works in both directions. That knife cuts both ways. Enterprises can start doing the same thing for positive impacts on developing things like antibiotics and breakthroughs in cancer or space travel, or there's a lot of things that I think that the reward outweighs the risk.
Yeah, well,
I'm generally an optimist. I'm a happy Canadian optimist who really, I'm pushing. I've been writing my members of parliament to socialize an AI in Canada, just like we've socialized our medicine and other things. I think it's something that humans should have access to in our country, regardless of where they are in society. I'd like to see it socialized up here as an essential service.
Well, and I think to your point too, like there are bad actors in anything, right? Like if you give somebody a hammer, you're going to have the folks that build beautiful homes, and you're going to have the people that go out and smash everybody's car window. So you gotta figure some of that out.
Well, I'm encouraged to see that. I don't know which particular organization it is, but there's an organization partnering up with OpenAI to help make a child-friendly ecosystem and child-friendly GPTs. And I was reading something Bill Gates had written that he believes that human literacy, the time to take to make a human literate, will go down by 18 months with AI. That's a very, very optimistic utopian paper if you're looking for good news about AI.
Some of the people that I know could use that now, and I mean, if it reduces their literacy by 20 years, they'd be good. But that's another story.
Good point. True. No, I'm very optimistic. There's new wearable AIs. There's a new portable AI that's kind of like a push-to-talk walkie-talkie. That's fairly affordable. So maybe for people that can't afford an iPhone or can't afford an internet connection, but they can afford a portable device that's connected to 5G and just do push-to-talk AI. Imagine, like when I was a kid, my parents plunked me down in front of the Nintendo, right? And that was my babysitter. Imagine being able to answer. I was actually, this is to, on a kind of, very serious note. take the average parent, the average human parent. Do you think that they would be able to explain why the sky is blue to a child better or worse than an artificial intelligence today? What do you think, Ken?
I think it would be on the parent, but I
You
probably
think
I
that
would.
you think that an average human being, can understand
Yeah,
why the sky is blue better
on
than an
average,
AI?
no,
On
no.
average, probably not, right? I would bet on the AI. So why not take advantage of that as a technology? And when your child's just constantly in that span
Why?
of 2 to 6,
Why? Why?
why?
Why?
Let's find out. Let's find out together, which used to mean a trip to the library and finding the book. My parents used to do that. Let's go to the library and find some knowledge, or let's,
Yep,
check out some books, or the internet came along and you could start to Google these things, and Wikipedia came along. This has lowered the friction even lower now that you could sit there and say, let's find out why rabbits are hop and why deer run, or whatever the question the kid has, right?
exactly. So
Anyhow, I'm excited. I'm excited about it, Ken, obviously.
yeah, so we have a few minutes left here. I mean, we could go and talk all day on this, but you mentioned a couple of programming languages, Python and JavaScript specifically. Are those kind of the big languages that you're seeing out there in the AI world right now? And for folks that are JavaScript haters, because there are those folks out there, and there are other folks that may not be familiar with Python and whatnot. What's the state of the world for languages like Go or Java or C# and Kotlin
Yeah,
and the rest of the developer ecosphere out there?
I've seen Go is becoming quite popular in the network automation space,
Yep.
and I can assume that extends to the AI space. I've there's other frameworks like Llama Index. If you don't want to use LangChain, I'm not suggesting it's the only thing out there. It has sort of emerged as the dominant life form. I really couldn't tell you, Ken. I'm sure in the machine learning space, C++ is, or C or assembly, who knows what they're using when they really need the speed and when they're really dealing with the large language models. I know Python is still popular in machine learning. I
Yep.
started with Python because it's funny. My journey was from Ansible for network automation. I went to school for programming, and I graduated in 2003, so over 20 years ago. And our language stack at the time was so-called modern languages, which at the time was C++, Java, HTML, Visual
Mm-hmm.
Basic, VB6, not even C#, and then a legacy stack of COBOL, JCL, and Kix to help program mainframes. So I didn't actually learn Python until very late in my life, because the network automation, the path from Ansible to Python was quite smooth, I would say,
Mm-hmm.
um, in that I was trying to use PyETS to automate networks. So I think there's an opportunity now for anyone watching who maybe doesn't know Python or really doesn't know programming at all. Um, you can use one of two things. It's hard. Like, I struggled with the deck of cards things. We're going to make a Python thing that makes a deck of cards, and you're going to flip cards. It wasn't tangible. It wasn't until I said, look, I want to add a loopback to a router using Python, right? An
Right.
actual tangible thing. And then you build backwards from your requirements, right? Like a
Yep.
developer would. So find an AI thing. I want to chat to a PDF. I want to take this CSV file of rodeo statistics and just chat with it. I want to take, because then the next step is network integration or API integration, right? I want to talk to my Identity Services Engine API and chat with the JSON data. That's easy to do if you started chatting with a rodeo CSV file. Really is. Right? So don't be intimidated. Start somewhere. You will fail. The failure, my favorite thing in the whole world, Ken, is a new error message. A new
Yeah.
error message for me is like something to celebrate, something to make note of, because I've had an effect on that machine I'm trying to tell to do something. Right? So if something says, error on line 45, and 10 minutes later, I'm adjusting, and it says this failed to build because of line 92. I don't get upset by that. I go, all right, right? I made it 50 more lines in my code. I'm
Exactly.
really close to getting it to compile. And what did I learn? What did I fix? What was it on line 45? Was it a comma, or was it really a logical problem with my thinking? Or was it
Yep.
syntactical in the syntax? Learn
Yep.
from these experiences, everyone. It's really, you will astound yourself on your progress, I would say.
Well, and the other thing that, especially if you're new to programming, even long time programmers get things wonky sometimes, and they do get errors. Sometimes there's syntax errors. I remember I was working on a program. My daughter was probably 10 or 11. She knows nothing about coding at all. And I was beating my head against the wall because the thing just wouldn't work. I couldn't see it. She walks in, she goes, "Daddy, should that be a 0 or an O?" And I'm like, "Oh
Ah.
man." And boom, it worked, and everything. Yeah. Um, so, bugs happen. I do want to call out here, because we have a few minutes left, and hopefully you can answer
Sure.
this. Rodney Elder sent in a message here that I think is great. A good question. So, if we were to imagine how AI could help analyze data traffic flows for real-time anomalies, what impact would that have on network or application security, do you think?
So I happen to be privileged enough to present with a Cisco employee named Dave Zacks, and his presentation on AI was more what Cisco has been doing and how we use it in our products. One of the most fascinating things to me was the impact on AI and predictive analysis. Now we're talking
Mm-hmm.
about predictive over generative, but still from equal cost multipathing, and how equal cost multipathing only has access to the tuples that it has access to, and you can still have congestion on links. And he has the graph. It's almost double the throughput using predictive analysis to understand where things should be hashed and load balanced through a fabric of devices. So it's all. I don't want to say that this is futuristic. I think AI is already shaping our traffic in certain conditions. Um, on the packet analysis thing, I really think that things start with a simple idea, a simple demo, one packet with a lang chain. Imagine moving that into hardware in a few years, where the first hop of a malicious packet, it has the AI intelligence on the ISP's router to kill that flow. Imagine if we could remove spam from the internet. Now I grew up with the internet, and spam has
Oh,
overtaken
oh, John, you're singing my
that.
language now.
But
Removing spam. Let's figure
So if
that
we
one
can
out.
get into that visibility right in the hardware, it's coming. The future is here, right? Imagine that as traffic's flowing, the AI starts to say, hang on, this particular source in this particular region is responsible for 4% of the malicious traffic in, this geographic region. We're just going to deny that flow, right? I think it's very exciting. And Rodney, I think that's what we need to do, is keep imagining what would the impact of this new tool that we have, this new capability as humans that we have. um, I think it's like penicillin or electricity or the printing press. Like, I think this is going to have human, historical, civilization, societal type impact. I don't think this is just a toy, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of things that we can do with it. And it's going to bring a lot of benefits. I think, going back to what we said at the beginning of the show, um, at the moment anyway, we still need to have that human interaction and kind of cross-check everything, provide feedback to the models so that they can improve, and that we're getting quality information out that's, truthful. And yeah.
Well, it's only going to get better. And I'm worried about bias. That's one of the things I guess I'm worried about ethically is that that no one is excluded or left out or made to feel inferior or based on the training data or how models are trained or
right. I mean, if you
or
only train, I mean, like the classic case is if you only train your image recognition on, um, you know, old white guys, everything the model is going to see is an old white guy, right? So when you start
right.
showing other images, they're like, oh, that's not a human. So
Right. So those are some of the things that are of concern as to how we're training the models. I thought that so the Phi 2 model from Microsoft was trained on academic textbooks. Like so they sort of screened what the material was. It was sort of because we all know garbage in, garbage out. That
right.
applies to large language models. And if we're just pointing it at the World Wide Web, how much of that World Wide Web is garbage? There's also sort
Oh,
of this
none.
weird thing.
If it's on the internet, it's true.
Yeah, I know. We're running out of time, but I guess the other concern I have, you mentioned, some of the things I worry about. I worry about it entering a death spiral because as you know, more and more of the content that's on the World Wide Web is AI generated. And then if AI is learning from the World Wide Web, it's learning from AI generated content more than human generated
Right.
content. And then therefore it generates more AI content that it's then learning from. And it sort of enters a death spiral without taking in human input into this feedback loop.
Yeah.
That's something I hope we can break out of. I don't know how they're going to overcome that, but that's another thing to worry about. But Ken, I thank you so much for having me on this show. I really thought that was fun building the Rodeo GPT live. That I got a kick out of doing that with you. So thank you for letting me
Well, thanks
improvise
for
today.
coming, John. It's always a pleasure. And you know, so thanks again, everybody else, for joining and watching today. If you like this sort of format, let me know in the comments, and I'll look for other guests and maybe bring John back, and we can build a real functional chat GPT sort of thing based on rodeo data, or who knows, some other sort of Western Wild West coding sort of data. Anyway, thanks again, John. Great to see you. And for everybody else, happy coding.